guys, ChrisFix here, and today I'm going to show you how to replace the wheel bearings on your trailer with the most in-depth video on the internet, so let's get started. So whether you have a car trailer, an enclosed trailer, a utility trailer, horse trailer, a camper, a large boat trailer, or a small boat trailer, after watching this video, you'll be able to replace the wheel bearings on pretty much any trailer. Additionally, I'm going to show you how to change your own tires at home yourself using one of these manual tire changers. I actually mounted it up to a pallet. That way it's portable. You can move it around. You don't have to drill into your concrete. And this works incredibly well. And the reason why we're changing the tires is because look at this. Look at how bad that is. We have tread separation there. The rubber is all dry rotted. We have the belt coming through and it's all rusted. These are just not safe to drive on. It's not even holding air. So we're going to change those out with some nice new Trans Eagle tires I got from Priority Tire. They recommended these, so I can't wait to get those in. And I'm also going to show you guys how to find the correct size and load rating for your trailer so you get the correct tires so it's safe to drive on. So between the new bearings and tires, this is going to be an awesome setup. So let's get started. And here are all the tools and products you're going to need to get this job done. As always, we're using common hand tools, so you could do this at home yourself on a budget. So we have a rubber mallet, hammer, pliers, punch, ratchet, sockets, pocket pry bars, torque wrench, and of course, our safety glasses. So those are the tools. Here are the products for each wheel on your trailer. You're going to need a cotter pin, a seal, 2 bearings, 2 races, and it's very, very, very important that you use high quality wheel bearings. Do not cheap out here. These are essential for safely trailering down the road, so use a name brand that you could trust, and these are made in the USA. I will teach you how to find the parts numbers to all these for your specific trailer. It's actually pretty easy. That way you could get the correct parts. Then we're going to be using some grease. This is very important as well. Make sure you get grease that is made for trailer bearings. We have our grease gun, and then we're going to be installing our bearing buddies. These are awesome. They help out so much because they keep a positive pressure of grease. Always feeding the bearings grease. That way, water and dust don't get into the bearings. I'll show you how to install that. And then finally, we have this really cool cutaway that I got water jetted so you can see what's actually going on. I'm a visual learner, so I wanted to show you this. We have our seal, inner bearing, outer bearing, and then I could teach you how to properly tighten down your axle nut. So many people make this mistake and ruin their bearings. I'm going to show you the right way to do it, so that's going to be helpful. So those are all the tools and products you're going to need. I'll link everything down in the description so you can easily find it. And with that said, let's get started. Now the first thing we need to do is jack up the trailer. That way we could get the wheel off. Now this is a single axle trailer. Real quick, if you have a double or even triple axle trailer and you need to lift up a wheel with no tools, all you need to do is slide a couple of pieces of wood in front of the other tire to make a ramp, then drive the trailer up onto the wood, and now the other wheel is free up in the air and could be removed. And in most trailers, all you're going to need are 4 to 5 inches to make this work. So this is a real quick and easy way to lift your wheel off the ground, and it comes in handy when you have a blowout on the side of the road and you need to change your tire. So keep that in mind. But in this case, we have a single axle trailer and a jack, so let me show you how to jack up the trailer. Now, the first thing I like to do is, if you can, have your truck attached to your trailer. That helps out tremendously. It provides a point of stability right there, and it just makes it a lot safer to jack up a trailer. The next thing you need to do is go to the other side of the trailer and chalk off both sides of the wheel so the trailer can't roll. Now back on the other side, let's break all 5 of these lug nuts loose with the tire on the ground. That way the wheel doesn't spin. And if you have an impact gun, use it. I'm just showing you guys you could get this done with common hand tools. With the lug nuts loose, now we can get the jack under the trailer frame, and I like to place the jack in front of the tire, which is more towards the middle of the trailer, to keep it balanced. Now that the tire's off the ground, let's get the jack stand under the frame in front of the tire and behind the tire. That way we have a nice stable platform to work on. Now we can let the trailer down onto the jack stands, and I like to pump the jack back up so it lightly touches the frame just for extra backup. Good, and finally let's remove the lug nuts and the wheel could come off. Now we could remove the plastic cap, and with a rubber mallet we could hit the dust cap until it comes off. Good, and the rubber mallet prevents damage to the dust cap just in case you want to reuse it. Next you want to use a pliers to straighten out the cotter pin, which is what prevents the axle nut from vibrating loose. And once that's straight, it should pull right out. Beautiful. Now you never want to reuse your old cotter pin. Always replace them with brand new ones, especially on a trailer where the axle nut relies on the cotter pin to keep the wheel from coming off. Now I haven't touched this axle nut, but if it's installed properly, it should be able to loosen by hand. Beautiful. So many people over tighten these and this ruins the bearings, but this was actually tightened correctly. And don't worry, I'm going to show you the correct method to tighten this down when we install the new bearings. So let's remove the nut completely. Then there's an important washer right behind the nut that you need to remove. Don't lose this. And now the hub should slide right out. So with the hub removed, let's replace the seal and the bearings. Now it's very important that you put this down in a clean workspace. You do not want anything that is sandy, that's gritty, that's dirty, because you don't want that getting into the hub, which will ruin the brand new bearings and cause this to prematurely fail. Speaking of dirty, it's also a good idea to have a lot of paper towels on hand because this could get a little messy with all the grease that's in the hub. So let's get started. And real quick, to give you a better visual of what we're doing, since this is kind of enclosed and hard to see, I cut out a hub so you could get a good view of the bearings inside. So first, we'll need to remove the outer bearing, and that'll come right out. Then at the back of the hub, we have a seal and the inner bearing. The seal is going to take some force to pop out. I'll show you a trick on how to get that out very easily. And then we'll remove the inner bearing. And all that leaves are these two hardened steel races. To get those out, we're just going to use a punch and hammer it out. So now that you have a good visual, let's get her done. And the first thing we need to do is remove the outer bearing, and that just comes right out. Then we could flip this over, and we need to remove the seal and the inner bearing. Now to remove the seal, there are a few different methods, but I have one method that requires no tools and is very easy to do, so let me show you. So all you do is go back to your axle, and you're gonna get your hub and place it back on the axle, just like that, almost like if you're reinstalling it, but there's no bearing in here. Then grab your axle nut and thread the axle nut on all the way so all the threads are engaged. Now, so you have an idea of what's gonna happen, we're gonna pull the hub out, and the axle nut is gonna act like a slide hammer and remove the bearing and seal. So we wanna give this a firm yank. Beautiful, and that's all there is to it. No tools needed, and you can see the inner bearing and the seal are removed. Now let's get the axle nut off, and then let's remove the bearing and the seal, and it's that easy. Now here are two other seal removal methods I want to show you as well. And for the first method, we're going to be using the classic seal removal tool. So get the skinny end of the tool and place it behind the seal like that, and then just use the tool to pry the seal out. Good, and that's all there is to it. And now you could remove the bearing. And the final seal removal method I have is to use a self-tapping screw. You want to use a relatively long screw, and you want to drive it into the seal. And make sure you leave a good amount sticking out, that way you could grab it with the pliers and pull it out. This method works great for spots that you can't use a puller in, like for the rear main seal, so I wanted to show you guys. And with the seal removed, now you can remove the bearing, and make sure you clean up any metal shavings, that way it doesn't get into the hub. Okay, so with the seal and bearings removed, the last thing we need to do is remove the two races that are inside the hub. So first, you want to remove all the old grease from the hub, that way we could clearly see the races we need to remove. And I'm just using a paper towel, pushing it all the way through to clean all the grease out. Then let's hit it with some brake cleaner to do a final rinse and flush out any dirt we didn't pick up with the towel. Beautiful, so with most of the grease removed, now we could clearly see the races. There's one on this side, and there is one on that side, and now we could go and punch them out. Let me show you how. So this is the bearing race or bearing cup. It is a hardened piece of steel that is pressed inside the hub, and how it works is the bearing fits inside of this and rides inside of it. So it's very important that when we replace the bearings, we replace the races. Too many people only replace the bearings and they put them in the old races, and that causes them to wear out prematurely. It's one extra step, it's really quick. Let me show you how to do it. So just as a better visual, we have our cutaway here. You can see there's a race there and a race there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna get a punch like this, and we're just gonna hammer along the race. And the punch is going to be able to grab the edge of the race, and we're going to hammer it out. Now when picking out your punch, you want to make sure that you use a flat punch like this, not a pointed punch like that, which could damage the hub. Alright, so let's get the flat punch on the edge of the race, and I'm using a 4-pound hammer to work my way around the race to try to evenly punch it out. Now you really want to hit it hard to get that race out. Light taps just aren't going to move it. You're going to need a good amount of force. So just keep hammering your way around the race to work it out of the hub. Alright, and just like that, the inner race has been removed. Now let's go remove the outer race. And I realize not everybody has a nice vise like this, so I'm going to show you could get this job done with blocks of wood as well. And since we're going to remove the outer race, we're going to face this down, push the wood together, and now the bearing has space to pop out. So same as before, work your way around the race and walk it out of the hub. Beautiful, and just like that, we removed the other race from the hub without using a vise, just 2 blocks of wood. So it's out with all the old parts, the races, the bearings, and the seal, and in with the new parts. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, how do you know which parts you need for your trailer? Because it's not as easy as with a car where you have a year, make, and model. And even if you do have a year, make, and model of your trailer, there could be different axle sizes, which means different bearing sizes. There's a lot of variables. So one foolproof way to know the exact correct parts you're gonna need is to take the old parts that we just removed and look for the part numbers. So I'm going to clean the grease off of this bearing. This is the outer bearing, And you can see right there it says L44649. So that is the bearing part number, and that'll get you an exact replacement bearing. But you don't want to just check the outer bearing, you also want to check the inner bearing because sometimes they could be different, but in this case you can see they have the same exact part number. And just to show you, here's the new bearing, L44649. It's the same exact part. Same thing goes for the old races. There should be part numbers stamped onto them, and right there, L44610. Both the outer and inner races are the same part. And then if we check the new part, L44610, so we're good to go. And finally, the hardest part to find a part number, because usually it is mangled or it is rusted, is the seal. Just to give you an idea, we have a brand new seal here, and here's the part number. Actually, that's the size of the seal. But either way, it's on the rubber, and there's no way we're gonna read anything off the rubber on this. So what you do is you get a caliper like this, and we're gonna measure the outside diameter first. So that is 1.98, and then we're gonna measure the inner diameter where the rubber is, and that's about 1.2, and then our width here, which is about 0.25, and that'll give us the exact size we need. And now that you know how to find the correct seal, there's two other things to look at when you're buying seals. The first thing is the coating on the seal. Some of them have a coating on it, like this one in the blue. Some of them are raw metal finish, like that one right there. They're both the same size, but the coating helps it seal better when your trailer goes in the water, like for a boat. Now, most seals today are coated like that, even if it's not for a boat, but if you have an uncoated seal, I'm going to show you how to use RTV on this to make it so that it's like a coated one. That way you could seal it up properly. And the second thing is the lip of the seal. There is a single lip seal and a double lip seal. So for the single lip seal, it's exactly as it sounds. There's one lip on this seal that seals in all the grease and seals out all the dust and water. Now for the double lip seal, we have two lips. We have an outer lip right here. You can see that edge right there. And then we have an inner lip. You can see that edge right there. And the outer lip seals out the dust and water, the inner lip seals in the grease. So when you're buying your seal, try to find a double lip and coated seal for your application. That's everything you need to know about seals. Alright, so now you know how to find the correct parts for your trailer. Let me show you how to properly install them into the hub. So first, we want to find any burrs or scratches like that one right there inside the hub. And we probably did this by accident with the punch when we hammered the old race out. And although this is small, I could still feel the burr with my finger, which means it needs to be smoothed out. So grab a scouring pad or 800 grit sandpaper and just lightly sand it smooth. You're not trying to get rid of the scratch, you're just trying to knock it down so you can't feel it anymore with your fingernail. And now we won't damage the new race when we push it in. Now on the other side of the hub, you can see we have some light staining and a little bit of corrosion here, which is pretty common. This is where the seal mounts and sometimes moisture gets trapped. Again, all you need to do is grab a scouring pad or 800 grit sandpaper and smooth this down. Now you're not going to sand so much that you get rid of the staining, it's still going to be there. You just want to make sure you get it nice and smooth. Alright, so now we're going to use our brake cleaner and clean out the hub so there's no dirt or grit that could damage our new wheel bearings. Then I'm using a plastic bristle brush to agitate the surface and make sure we really get everything clean. And finally, we could give this one last spray down with the brake clean to flush out any dirt. Okay, and check it out, that looks great. So with the inside of our hub nice and clean, now we can install all the new parts, starting with the bearing race. And to do that, there are two different methods I have. The first one is using a really nice bearing race and seal driver set like this. I'll link one in the description that doesn't break the bank and it'll get the job done. Now, if you don't want to go out and buy a set, a little trick is to go to your big brand part stores, Vance Auto Parts, O'Reilly's, AutoZone, Napa. A lot of times they rent tools for free because they want you to be able to buy their parts and install them, so they're kind of incentivized. But just in case you can't find this driver set, I will also show you how to get the job done using a big socket. So let's get started. Now there are two different sides to the race. We have the wide edge side, and then we have the narrow or skinny edge side, and then it kind of tapers in. You want to make sure this wide edge side goes down into the hub like that, so the skinny edge is facing up. Now we could grab the correct size driver from the set, and you'll know you have the correct size because the shoulder of the driver needs to fit on the narrow edge of the race, just like that, and be nice and flush. That way we could drive this all the way deep into the hub. Now if it's too small, like this one right here, it's gonna fit inside, and that is not good. We do not wanna drive down onto this surface that the bearing rides on. And if it's too big, it's gonna overhang, and you're not gonna be able to drive this down deep enough. So find the correct driver that fits right on the edge, just like that. Now to set this up, let's grab the part that you hammer and put the driver on the end of it. Then we could just finger tighten the bolt on the end like that. And this is the final setup. Now real quick, we want to remove the race and we need to put a very thin coat of grease on the inside of the bore. That way when you hammer the race in, it doesn't gall the surface. Now let's get the race back in, and remember the thinner edge faces up. Now we could get the driver on the race, and you want to begin with light taps to get it started. That way it goes in evenly. And once you drive it in a little bit and see it's level, now we could hammer it in with more force. And you'll know that race is seated all the way in because it'll feel and sound different. Perfect. And you can see that race is bottomed out. It's seated against the lip in the hub, so we're good to go. And just in case you were wondering why we can't use a punch to install the race, it's because if you miss the edge here and you go up against this surface right here and scratch that or nick it, it is ruined. This surface has to be a perfect finish because the bearing is going to sit inside of here and roll against it. So we can't have any damage to this surface at all. Now, our driver is made of aluminum, so when it sits inside that race, even if it bangs up against it, it's a softer metal than the hardened steel in the race, so it won't cause any damage. So now you know how to use a driver. Let me show you the trick to using a socket to get the other race in. And this race is for the inner bearing, so let's flip this over. And now it's essential that you find a socket that fits perfectly on the outside edge of this race. And then you also need to make sure that the socket fits inside the hub like this. That way it can be driven all the way in. So just like before, add a thin coat of grease on the inside of the hub to prevent galling, and then fit the race into the hub with the thin edge facing up, and place the socket right on that edge, and we could hammer it in. Beautiful. So with the inner bearing race completely seated down into the hub, both races are installed. We are ready for the next step, and that is to install the inner bearing and then bearing seal. Now, these bearings do not come greased from the factory. They are completely dry. If you install them like this, you're going to ruin the bearings, and all this hard work was for nothing. So let me show you how to properly grease a bearing. And there's two ways to do that, the hand packing method or using a bearing packing tool like this. And I'm going to show you both ways. And real quick, before you start packing the bearings, make sure your gloves are clean. You don't want any grit or anything on them. Make sure you have paper towels out and ready to go because this could get a little messy. Also, have the garbage can next to your workspace open, ready to go. So that way you could throw your paper towels right in because your hands are going to be covered in grease. So let's get started. This is the grease I'll be using. I'll put a link in the description to it. It's designed to work on trailer bearings and it won't break down if water gets in it. So just get a golf ball sized amount of grease like that. And I'm a righty, so I'm going to put it in my left palm. Then you're going to get your bearing, and we want to force the grease in between the bearing cage, right where the rollers are. You can see there's an opening right there. Also on this side there is an opening, but that opening is smaller. So we're going to force it into this opening until it starts coming out the top here. So here's how you do it. All you need to do is scrape the edge of the grease with the opening of the bearing. And you're going to push the bearing down and drag it against your palm to pack that grease into the bearing. And you want to just keep repeating this process until the grease comes out the top of the bearing, which means it's packed with grease. And if you take a look at the top of the bearing, you can see it's starting to get filled with grease. Perfect. This is exactly what you want to see. So now we have this part of the bearing packed. We need to turn the bearing a little bit and repeat the process. Again, you're just scraping the edge of the grease with the edge of the bearing, pushing it into your palm, packing that grease into the bearing. And now you can see it starting to come out the top of the bearing. So let's turn the bearing and keep packing. And for some reason, I find this very satisfying. We're still using an old school method that's been used since the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and then when you run out of grease on your palm, you could get more, or in this case, there's excess grease that built up on the inside of the bearing, and this should be plenty to finish the bearing off. Now, you always need to pack new bearings with grease, but after you use the bearings, it's recommended to repack them using the same exact method once a year or every 12,000 miles, whatever comes first. That way, the fresh grease keeps the bearings in good shape. Alright, so now our bearing is completely packed. You can see the grease is in between the bearing cage and all the roller bearings. And then if we flip this over, you can see there's complete coverage of grease on the other side as well. And then any excess grease that you might have on your hand, you want to spread on the outside of the roller bearings just to make sure that they're coated and not dry. And that's how you pack a bearing by hand. Now we need to pack the other bearing, and for that, I'm going to show you how to use a bearing packing tool, which is filled with grease on the bottom. So first, remove the dust cover. This is nice because it keeps the grit out. Then unscrew the plunger. And now we can put the bearing in here. And you can see there's holes at the bottom which the grease is going to push up through. So just place the bearing in the center like that. Then grab the plunger and screw it back in. That way it centers the bearing and seals it off so the grease only has one place to go, through the bearing cage. Now we need to push this down to force the grease up into the bearing. And it does take all your body weight to get this thing to work. And this is exactly what you want to see. The grease pushes right up through the bearing cage all at once, making this a quick and easy method. And that's it. Now we can unscrew the plunger and take a look at that. Perfect. So while this packing tool packs the bearings very quickly and nicely, you still want to add some grease to the outside of the rollers so they aren't dry. Alright, so now you know how to pack bearings. Let's go install them into the hub and finish this up. So first get some grease and coat the race, that way it's well lubricated. Then we can install the bearing, tapered end down, that way it fits into the cup of the race. Good. So with the inner bearing installed, now we could go and install the seal. And just as a reminder, you want to try to find a seal that has a double lip, and you also want to try to find a seal that has a coating on it, so this seals up perfectly. In that case, you would just put it like that and then hammer it in so it's flush. But just in case you can't find a seal with a coating, I have an uncoated seal here. I'm going to show you how to add your own coating using RTV. So let's remove the coated seal. And for the uncoated seal, we're going to get a bead of RTV on the outside like that. And then just use your finger to spread it out so there's a really thin skim coat all the way around. You want to make sure there's complete coverage all the way around. And again, it just needs to be a thin coat because this is a tight fit. And this coating is going to seal the water and dust out. Now we want to add the seal right away, and there are two sides. We have the cupped side, and that goes towards the bearing because it holds the grease. And then we have the flat side, which faces up. Then we'll use a rubber mallet to carefully tap in that seal. And you want to work your way around the seal, trying to tap it in so it goes in evenly. Good, and that's nice and flat. The last thing to do here is to fill the open area between the bearing and the seal with grease. So pack the grease in there, and also make sure that you get the grease in between the two lips of the double lip seal. Beautiful. So with the inner bearing and seal properly installed and greased, we will add some more grease a little bit later on through the Zerk fitting once this is on the axle, but for now let's flip this over and install the outer bearing. So first, I like to add just a little bit of grease to the inside of that hub. You see the bore in there, right in the middle? There is no grease and it is completely dry, and we do not want this to rust because then flakes of rust could get into the bearing and cause this to fail prematurely. So there's a little bit of a debate of whether or not to keep this empty or add grease, and my suggestion is to add a little grease. You just want like a 1/4 inch around the entire bore. It's a little coating that'll prevent the inside from getting rusty, but adding some grease to the middle just like that is what I've always done, and I've never had any problems. Now let's add some grease to the race just like we did to the other race. And finally we could add the bearing, tapered end down, and push it all the way in. Okay, so now that we're done installing everything into the hub, let me show you how to properly install this onto the axle. And before we slide the hub on, first thing we need to do is clean the axle. Actually, real quick, these leaf springs on this trailer have seen better days. They are falling apart. Look at how rusty they are, and they're definitely not safe to drive on. So, you know what that means? Out with the old and in with the new. So now let's get back to cleaning the axle. So get a towel, and we want to remove all the old grease and dirt from the axle. Also right here where that seal rides always collects dirt and grease, so make sure you get this nice and clean as well. With the axle clean, now you want to inspect the inside of the axle right here. This is where the seal is riding. Just to give you an idea, here is the seal, and it will ride right on here in the hub, and this spins pretty quickly. So it's pretty important that this surface right here doesn't have a big groove. I can't grab anything with my fingernail, and this is looking pretty clean. So in this case, what I'm going to do is grab my scouring pad, or you could use like an 800 grit sandpaper, and we're just going to lightly clean this up, and it's just going to freshen up the surface. That way our new seal has a nice, clean, smooth surface to ride on. Now, if this surface is really pitted from corrosion, or it has a groove in it from wear and tear, and you could grab it with your fingernail, you might have to replace the axle because it's probably not going to seal properly. In this case, we are good to go. Same thing for this surface right here. If there's a lot of corrosion or grooves, you might need to replace the axle. In this case, we have a little bit of corrosion, but nothing I could really feel with my fingernail, and the hub will have no problem riding on this. So let's get it installed. So cover the axle with a coat of grease to prevent this from getting corroded. Good. Now we can install the hub, and remember the studs are facing out, and also I like to put my thumbs on the outer bearing. That way when we install it, it doesn't pop out. So slide the hub on carefully so you don't damage the seal, and make sure it's all the way seated on the axle. Good. Now we need to make sure we install the washer, and don't forget to do this. Also make sure it's not grooved. You can see there's some marks on here, but I can't feel them with my fingernail, so we're good on this side, and we're good on the other side. It's important this is smooth and flat because this is what sits up against the bearing. Finally, add some grease to both sides of this washer, then we can install it. And now we could get the axle nut on there and hand tighten it all the way down. So with our axle nut just finger tight, now comes one of the most important parts of this entire process, and that is making sure we tighten down the axle nut properly. If you over tighten it, you'll ruin the bearing. If you under tighten it, you'll ruin the bearing. There's a specific way to tighten down trailer bearings because they're tapered, so let me show you. Okay, so at this point it's just hand tight. Now get your torque wrench set to 25 foot-pounds onto the axle nut, and then you're gonna spin the hub and tighten the axle nut a little bit. Then you're gonna spin the hub again, and we're spinning this that way the bearings inside see evenly as you tighten it down. Perfect, so that's 25 foot-pounds, and the hub feels like it's bound up and not turning smoothly anymore, which is fine. So let's spin it and double check to make sure it's torqued. Good. Now you want to get a regular ratchet or a wrench, and you want to set it to the 12 o'clock position. Then we need to loosen the axle nut about 1/8 of a turn or 45 degrees, so it's between the 10 and 11 o'clock position. Now if you take a look at where the cotter pin goes, you can see the castle nut is blocking the hole for the cotter pin. So you could try tightening it by hand, but that's not going to work. It's already pretty tight. So you're going to loosen it just enough so that the hole isn't blocked anymore. Now the cotter pin could slide right through, and you can see the axle nut is kind of loose, which oddly enough is correct. This allows the bearing to spin freely, and the spec is for the hub to have between 1 and 5 thousandths of an inch of play. Let me show you. So I set up a dial indicator on here, and let me just zero this out. That way I could show you guys at least visually what 1 to 5 thou looks like. So you can see the axle nut is exactly how we had it, and if you push the hub in, it goes to 0, and if we pull on it, it goes to around 3 to 4 thou, which is within our 1 to 5 thou spec that's recommended. And the only reason I'm showing you this is because most people don't have a dial indicator to check their work, and I wanted to show you that this is within spec as long as you tighten that axle nut down to 25 foot-pounds and then back it off about 1/8 of a turn. Even if you need to adjust the axle nut slightly to fit the cotter pin, you're going to be good to go. You're right in spec. Now let me show you the proper way to fasten the cotter pin. First off, do not reuse your old cotter pin. This axle nut is only on here finger tight, so the cotter pin is holding this in place. That way it doesn't come loose and your wheel doesn't fall off. So first, push the cotter pin all the way in with your finger and hold it there. Then grab a pliers and bend it outwards 90 degrees. Now you're going to want to readjust your pliers towards the end of the cotter pin to give you some more leverage, and you want to bend that cotter pin as flat as possible against the end of the axle. And that's about all I could do. So now wedge the pliers between the axle nut and cotter pin to keep the cotter pin in place, and then tap the end with a hammer to flatten it out. Good, now your axle nut is securely locked in place. That's not going anywhere. Now this is completely done. All you need to do is install a dust cap like this. You just need to fill it with grease. Take a little bit of that grease, put it around the edge of the cap like so. That way it doesn't get corroded. And now use a rubber mallet to tap the dust cap onto the end of the hub, making sure it goes in as straight as possible. And with that, you'd be good to go. But as you know, I like going above and beyond and showing you guys the best that you could get for your setup. And I'm gonna be installing these. These are called bearing buddies. They work amazing for keeping the water and the dirt out. So let's knock this dust cap off since we aren't using it, and install our bearing buddy. This thing is awesome because it is spring loaded, so it keeps a positive pressure on here. Let me show you. So first, get a little bit of grease on the end here, that way it doesn't corrode to the hub. Now hammer it on just like the other dust cap, making sure it goes in as straight as possible. Next, let's connect the grease gun to the Zerk fitting and pump this up with grease. So pump it up and watch the plate inside the bearing buddy get pushed outwards, and once you see it pushed all the way out and stay out, it's filled with grease. Now I like to spread the grease around inside to prevent any corrosion, and then push the dust cap on. Now in the back of the hub, we have a Zerk fitting for the inner bearing, and you can see it's purging grease, which is not supposed to happen. This means the fitting's bad. So loosen it up with a 10mm wrench and remove it all the way. And you can see the bearing buddy is keeping a positive pressure in the hub, pushing that grease out. Then let's get a new Zerk fitting right in here, and I'm installing an angled one. That way I can more easily add grease with the wheel on. Now let's attach the grease gun, and we're only going to need a few pumps since we have that bearing buddy installed. Good. And now we're done. Alright, so now you know how to properly replace the wheel bearings on your trailer. I did the other side as well, but now we can't reinstall these old dry rotted tires, so I'm going to show you how to use one of these manual tire changers to change your tires at home. But first, real quick, how do you know what the correct tire is for your specific trailer? First thing to look for is over on the trailer tongue. There is usually a sticker somewhere on the side here. You can kind of see where our sticker was. This trailer is pretty old, so that sticker is long gone. Now for this trailer, I know this sticker exists, and if we take a look down here, kind of near the tongue, right over here, you could see the sticker. And it gives you everything you need to know: the tire size, the tire pressure, which is very important, and also how much weight each axle could hold, which is important for finding the correct tire. So since we don't have that information, what we're gonna do is go off the tire that we have already. And what you wanna do is look right here. And this is our tire size, 175/80 R13. And then this number right here, 92/88M, is very important. The M is the max speed rating for this tire. And if you look at the chart, that's 81 miles an hour. And then the 92/88, 92 is for a single axle trailer, 88 is for a multiple axle trailer. And if you look at the chart, that means our tire could hold 1,389 pounds per tire. So that's about 2,800 pounds per axle, which is about right for this 19-foot boat. So we know which tire size we need and the tire load rating, but what brand do you go for? And I've had really bad luck with trailer tires. I don't want to talk about it. So I made a quick Instagram post asking you guys what tires you recommend from your experience, and I really appreciate all the suggestions. The top voted comment was from Priority Tire, and they recommended Trans Eagle tires for towing. So I went on their website and I searched for my tire size, which again, 175/80/13, and there are a bunch of different options. I mean, lots of tires. There's a bunch of high-end brands to more budget-friendly options, and I took a look at the tires they recommended, and it actually has a higher speed rating of 87 miles an hour and a higher load rating, so it's a heavier duty tire, plus you can't beat the price, so I ordered 3 of them. And I'll explain why I got 3 for a single axle trailer in a second. Now, I know buying tires could get really expensive, so before buying anything, it's worth checking the homepage for the special deals like these. And then there's also a discount page, which I'll link in the description for you. So if you need tires for your car or trailer, you could find some really good deals on here, and hopefully that helps you save some money. So that's how you properly find which size tire you need for your trailer. Thank you very much, Priority Tire, for the suggestion and for supporting the video. And with that said, let me show you how to mount your own tires. And the first thing we need to do is let all the air out. So go to the valve stem and remove the dust cap. Then use a valve stem core tool, and you want to insert this into the valve stem and unscrew it, that way the core comes out. And check this out, you can see our core is all corroded, so that's probably one of the reasons why the tire wasn't holding air. Okay, so as the air comes out, next we need to debead the tire. So place it at the base of the tire changer, and then this piece right here needs to go between the rim and tire like that. Now get the handle that comes with the tire changer and insert it here. And then this gives you the leverage you need to press the sidewall down and debead the tire. So push it all the way down like this. Then you want to rotate the wheel and push it down again. Perfect, and you can see how the tire came off the wheel. Now we need to flip this over and do the other side. So get the tool between the tire and rim and push down. Good, and you can see the tire separated from the wheel. Now let's mount the tire to the top of the tire changer. So line up the lug nut hole with the hole in the base right there. Then add the wheel holder, and finally insert the metal rod which prevents the wheel from spinning. Now let's tighten down the top, then snug it up with your tire iron. And now we can get the duck head attachment on here, and this is sold separately, but I highly recommend it because otherwise you're going to damage your wheels. And now with everything all set up, all you need to do is lubricate the duck head with some soapy water, then slide your tire iron under the sidewall of the tire, and then use leverage to lift the sidewall of the tire up over the duck head, like that. Now we want to lubricate the rest of the tire with soapy water, and this is very important. It makes the process a lot easier. Without lubrication, this is going to be impossible. And now we need to spin this duck head around the tire using the long metal bar for leverage. And you're going to have to use some force to do this. And what we're doing is lifting the tire up over the wheel like that. Good. Now we need to remove the bottom sidewall. So sneak that tire iron down under the bottom of the tire, then use the leverage you have to lift it up over the duck head. And so you have a better idea of what's happening, here's a view from under the tire. Now we could spray this side down with some soapy water, and you can't use too much soapy water, so get it really lubricated. And then the same process as before, work that duck head around the edge of the tire, and that lifts the other sidewall up over the rim. That way we can remove this tire off the wheel. Beautiful, and just like that, the old tire could be removed. Now before installing a new tire, we want to install a new valve stem. And to remove the old one, just grab a cutters and cut the base right here. Then the valve stem should come right out. Now we can install the new one. All you need to do is get it through the hole like that, then screw on a valve stem puller all the way. And this is designed to pull on the valve stem to seat it up into the wheel. Perfect. And that's all there is to replacing a valve stem. Now an extra step I like to do is to clean right where the tire bead seats onto the wheel, so spray it down with some soapy water, then use a metal wire brush and brush the surface to clean up any corrosion or old rubber or dirt left behind by the last tire. Good, then we could wipe it down to remove all that dirty water, and make sure you wipe down the entire wheel. Now we're going to do the same exact thing to the top where the other side of the tire seats to the wheel. And this is important to do so that the new tire has a nice clean, smooth surface to seal to. Sometimes you could install a new tire and it could leak air through the surface, especially if there's corrosion or dirt. Beautiful, so with the rim nice and clean on the inside where the bead seats, our valve stem is brand new and installed. We are ready to install our brand new tire, so let me show you how. Okay, so now let's get the new tire up on here. And in this case, I'm going to be using this tire lubricant on the new tire. It's inexpensive and works really well, but if you don't have it and you need to use something in a pinch, a lot of people use dish soap. And all you have to do is spread it around the entire sidewall where the bead is. And now we're going to flip this tire over and push it onto the wheel. Sometimes this easily pushes onto the rim, but this tire is a little stubborn, and that's okay. Just get your duck head attachment mounted, and then spin it around the wheel to push the bead of the tire over the rim. Good. Now we need to use the tire iron to put the bead of the tire under the duck head. Then we need to add lubricant around the entire bead and repeat the process. This is literally just the opposite of what we just did. Instead of removing the tire, we're pushing it back on. And this last part takes a little extra strength because we're really stretching the brand new tire. There we go. All right, beautiful. The last thing to do is to fill this with air. Now, before you do that, if you have a yellow dot on the sidewall of your tire, in this case, we don't have that, but if you do, that is the lightest point of the tire, and you'd want to rotate the tire to match the valve stem. So that dot would be right here where the valve stem is, because the valve stem weighs just a little bit extra, so it helps balance the tire. And real quick, just for reference, here is what that yellow dot looks like. So these tires are for my barn find restoration I'm going to be doing. And you can see right here, this is the light spot of the tire, and it needs to be matched up with that valve stem. But since our trailer tires don't have the yellow dot, now we can move on to filling the tire with air, and I'm leaving the valve core in the stem to do this. And at your compressor, you want to set the tool pressure to as high as it goes. That way it's adding as much air as quickly as possible to seat that bead. Now you want to look on the side of the tire, and it says to inflate to 65 psi. So let's fill the tire up with air. And notice how you could hear that air escaping and the tire isn't really filling up with air? Well, a trick is to lift the tire at different spots to press the bead against the wheel until it seals. Perfect, and now you can see the tire's actually filling with air, and that bead just seated. Okay, so now we need to pay attention and only fill this up to 65 psi. Don't overfill it. Good. Then we could get that cap on the valve stem, and now you know how to replace a tire with a manual tire changer. Now off camera, I mounted the 2 other tires, so all 3 trailer tires have been changed. And one last thing, how do you balance the tires at home? Well, the first option is you don't balance them. They're small, they're for a trailer, you might have a little vibration, and in that case, these are ready to go. But you could also use something like balancing beads, and these are actually pretty cool. So what you do is they come with these bottles, and in these bottles are these little beads. And here's what they look like. The beads are made of glass, that way they don't absorb moisture, and you're gonna need about 3 ounces, which is about 1/3 of the bottle for 1 trailer tire to balance it. And the third option is going to a shop. You already saved a bunch of money doing this yourself, just have them balance it. So that's what I chose to do, and this shop has some nice equipment. So here's the process to balancing the tires. The tech mounts the wheel to the balancing machine, and then lowers the hood. Then the machine spins the wheel and checks the balance. And in this case, you could see we need 3/4 of an ounce, which isn't horrible, that's actually pretty good. And if you look here, the laser points to exactly where you need to place the weight, and then the tech could hammer that weight onto the side of the wheel. Finally, the wheel is spun up again and tested to make sure it's properly balanced. And check it out, we're good to go. Now back at home, let's get the spare tire on the trailer and torque it down. Then we could get the port side wheel on the trailer and torque that to spec. And finally, there's one last wheel to get on the trailer. So let's hand tighten all 5 lug nuts on there. Then we could remove the jack stands and drop it down so the wheel just barely touches the ground. Now let's torque the wheel to spec in a crisscross pattern, and finally drop it down the rest of the way. And one last thing, in order to prevent your tires from degrading over time if you keep your trailer outside, tire covers like this are inexpensive and easy to install, and they prevent the UV radiation from degrading your tires. So I highly recommend it. But I don't need these right now because we're taking the boat for a ride. So there you go, now you know how to properly replace the wheel bearings and the tires on a trailer. And I'm really excited because now we could safely pull this trailer on the road and test out this project boat on the water. And man, oh man, what a difference. I'm glad we did this right away. This trailer is riding nice and smooth. And I know this trailer is now gonna be reliable. Now finally at the boat ramp, we could back the boat down into the water, and you could see how those hubs get completely submerged, but because we did everything properly, it's going to keep all that water out and keep those bearings in good shape. So there you go. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button for more informative how-to videos like this. As always, all the tools and products I used in this video are linked down in the description so you can easily find them. And now I'm off to sea trial the new project boat. She is running great, and this is a job well done.